K1, martial arts, and that mixed martial arts, the MMA, kick light, and full contact. So those are some of the categories where Uganda's kickboxing medals came from. So we have a total of 9, 4 of which gold, and then the 2 are bronze. Meanwhile, no, 4 are silver, 2 are gold, 2 are bronze, and 3 are gold, to make a total of 9 medals that came through. Now, the participants on Uganda's team that featured at the 2021 World Kickboxing Championship in Egypt will live to forget the golden warm reception upon return from home. The triumphant 11-man team returned home on Monday, October 25th, 2021 in 2 different batches aboard Ethiopian Airlines and the Egypt Airlines. They were received officially by the president of Uganda Kickboxing Federation, Patrick Luyonza, the Chief Executive Officer, Larry Mwembesa, and Lieutenant General Peter Elweru, accompanied by the media family and the close friends of these particular participants, who had actually made sure they returned home with medals to support Uganda's flag and to lift it to the world out there, because this is where we want our sports to be. Every time we have these participants or these athletes that normally put us to the world map, this is where we definitely want our world to be going. Now, moments after completing the immigration process, they were hosted in the lavish VIP press lodge on Entebbe International Airport, where Luyonza and Mwembesa made brief statements. He actually said that they welcomed them back from Egypt, where they participated in the World Kickboxing Championships, and they say they did their best to represent the country, the Pearl of Africa, by bringing back all those medals, winning all their fights in their respective angles, because gold, the 3 gold, represents that they won most of their fights that they were participating into. Look at the silver, means that maybe they were the runners-up, and then bronze comes in if you're taking the 3rd place. At Katikati Restaurant, they were hosted by a sumptuous welcome luncheon organized by Kampala's Central Division Mayor, also the president of Uganda Professional Boxing Commission, Salim Uhuru. The team had junior and pro-am fighters who were captained by Iron Lady Patricia Black Pearls Apollo, who defended her world title she has held since 2015. Apollo saluted the fighters, many of whom were first-timers on such an international event. Okay. And this is just to remind and say congratulations to the Ugandan kickboxing team. Every time you look at the Uganda athletes out there going out to lift our flag, we need to support them. We need to back them. This comes with facilitation from the government, the money. Look at situations like making sure that we give them our support. It may not be money, but it can actually come out as vocal support, or we can throw our love via social media to give them all they need in terms of support, because the support that we lay for them is that support that is going to help them out when they are competing for the different tournaments, because every time they win something, any silverware that comes in, any medal that comes back home, it is a medal that we count as Ugandan, and we count it like we were also taking part in the exercise. Of course, kudos to the boys, kudos to the team, kudos to the ladies, kudos to everyone who was taking part in this, from the technical team down to the coaches, down to the athletes themselves, those who made sure, or the kickboxers who made sure that we returned with the gold medals. And thanks for representing Uganda. Welcome back home, and yes, we do wait for other competitions that you can definitely go and compete favorably for Uganda. Meanwhile, let's move on to the next story from the world of sports business. This time around, we head to the international scene. More than 100 soccer clubs line up for $2.3 billion credit line, the $2.3 billion of credit line. UEFA is finalizing a $2.32 billion US dollar credit line for European football teams to help them recover financially from the pandemic. The fund is part of a 3-part plan to stabilize European soccer finances. Up to 100 European soccer clubs are lining up for a credit facility that UEFA is actually setting up to help teams recover financially from the pandemic. If you look at European soccer governing body, which finalized a 2.32 billion credit facility that will initially help clubs pay for unsettled transfer fees. If you look at these, Those fees typically go to lower revenue clubs, renting out players to more lucrative squads in leagues higher up the pyramid. The credit facility is the first in a three-part plan that seeks to stabilize European soccer's long-term financial picture. UEFA plans to set up a separate fund to buffer against the future crises. The organization could rewrite its financial rules to increase the timeline in which teams may restructure debts from 5 to 7 years and introduce a luxury tax on teams that spend over a certain percentage of revenue, perhaps 70% on player salaries. Okay, away from that, UEFA is now selecting banks to help fund the credit facility. The loans will be secured against broadcast income, and teams will receive a lower interest rate than what would otherwise be available. The organization earns nearly $4 billion annually in broadcast rights for all its competitions, namely the Champions League, which tallied 2.37 billion in media rights in the 2018 to 2019 season. Now, these teams on the European continent have actually faced a very big challenge because of COVID, because of the pandemic. And greatly, this has affected a lot and a lot more of what is happening. If you have to look at some of the situations in the world, depending on COVID-19 and how these teams are going to survive, UEFA has actually set up something like a pool. This pool is actually going to help them get these loans to help them try to recover from what happened with the pandemic. Look at teams like FC Barcelona. This FC Barcelona, away from the field, this shows you that money plays a very huge part. Or this shows you that the financial status of a team play a very huge part in what is going to be played on the pitch. Because we all know by the time Barcelona started up this season, they were in a financial crisis. And the financial crisis that they were in created a number of issues where they had to lose a number of players. They lost Lionel Messi, they lost Antoine Griezmann. So these are some of the key players that were helping them out win trophies. And at this time, if you look at the Barcelona team, you'll wonder whether they are even ready to win any trophy whatsoever. Someone may ask, why is Ronaldo Koeman still at the club? Because at the end of the day, with the financial status that they are in currently, I think they need to first complete the season with Ronaldo Koeman before they can actually look for another coach. And you can see that most of the players, the senior players in Jordi Alba, Geraldo Piqué, Sergio Busquets, had to actually accept a salary cut to accommodate other players like Memphis Depay, Luke de Jong, the other entrants into the Barcelona team. Barcelona actually is facing some of a very huge crisis. Not only Barcelona, meanwhile, imagine if a big team like Barcelona is now facing all these challenges. Now, let us set a focus on the teams, on the young teams in the European continent. These ones that have fewer sponsors, the fewer sponsors that are actually even bringing in the money, or they're actually generating less money. Imagine what COVID had to do to these teams, which damage it had to actually lay on board for these teams. So that is the same reason as to why UEFA realized that the best way to put these teams back into focus is to help them out, come through in a situation of granting them the opportunity to get some funds to facilitate their day-to-day activity. Okay, still with the international scene, the Super League trial files claim against UEFA and FIFA. Now, which trial are we talking about? We're talking about Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus. The three teams that still refuse to disavow the European Super League have filed a legal claim against UEFA and FIFA. Remember, the founder clubs were 12, and now we're left with only 3. The other 8 bowed out, with the other 8, which include Atletico de Madrid and the other teams from the English Premier League, have already bowed out. The claim questions whether FIFA and UEFA can act as both regulators and participants in the European football. The Super League rose and fell in only 48 hours last April this year. But its 3 holdouts are now threatening the football's major governing structures in Europe and the world. Let's look at teams like Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and Juventus. They have actually come out to file a claim against UEFA and FIFA, alleging that the two organizations violate European competition law by acting both as regulators with sanctioning power and participants that profit from the contests they oversee. Let's look at this situation. FIFA earned $6.4 billion from 2017 to 2020, mostly from the World Cup year of 2018. UEFA took in $12.5 billion over that same span of 2017 to 2018. Remember, with that period, competitions, UEFA Champions League, Euros, and everything that happens. The Super League initially launched with 12 teams, but the other 9 quickly dropped out in response to fierce backlash from fans and politicians. For instance, in the UK Premier Boris Johnson came out to actually rubbish the UEFA Super League, saying it is not good for the image of football. Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and Juventus had faced a potential 2-year suspension from UEFA tournaments for their refusal to quit the Super League, but UEFA dropped its sanctions and fines after the 3 teams scored a victory in a Spanish court. A22, Spanish-based organization, A22, a Spanish-based organization representing the clubs, wrote in the filing that it seeks to determine if UEFA and FIFA can legitimately exclude competition in a market that represents 1% of the gross domestic product of the European Union. The European Union's GDP was $15.2 trillion in 2020. UEFA has support at the highest level. 16 European governments will intervene on its behalf in the court hearing, and the European Commission will contribute guidance on UEFA's and FIFA's compliance with EU competition rules. So look at a scenario where we are all focusing on whether we are ready for, we were actually asking ourselves questions whether we are ready for the European Super League. The European Super League was actually having all the bigger teams of the European continents. Not all, but most of the bigger leagues. If you look at the top 6 clubs in the English Premier League, let's say Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, Tottenham were all going to feature in the European Super League, which also includes FC Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and Real Madrid, plus Juventus, which was actually taking part in there, PSG and others, but most of them had to quit immediately. Politicians and the fans were actually saying, no, this is totally against the image of football, destroying the image of football, which meant that small teams were not going to contribute in such a tournament. And if you look at some of the situations here in the European continent, this was greatly going to affect the world, and this was actually going to affect the world and the movement of what is happening in, if you have to look at the situations here, it was going to actually affect what is happening in the pre-pandemic levels, the scenarios that are happening in the world. Let's look at where we expect these teams to survive after COVID actually hit them, surprisingly, and quite unfortunate. But when they looked at this UEFA Super League,